Okay, so following the initial stock round auction, the normal stock round will start, and you will basically have two actions to perform. One will be sell any number of shares, and then followed by buy a share. And obviously we don't own any shares to begin with, so all we can do is really buy. And the play will proceed from the right of the person who last, or I should say left, because you normally go clockwise. The next player along from the person who bought the last private. So player 3 bought the last private, and so then it'll be player 4 will then have the first opportunity to start a company. In this game, I did mention it already, but a company will be able to operate once 5 shares, or 50%, have been purchased from the initial offer. So the initial offer is up here. So shares will reside in here, in players' tableaus, or in the open market. They will not go anywhere else. So they don't go into a player company like in 1846. These are separate from the company in that sense. Okay, and so the reason I've got it down slightly is so you can see these boxes here, because these are the par prices. So this is where things will start when you're first floating a company. So player 4 will go. Now player 4 has 250, 60, 70, 80, $285 and 285. So play proceeds from the person who last purchased in the private company auction, and that was player 3. So player 4 will go first. So he has 250, 60, 70, 85. So 285. 285 divided by 5, which is what you'd need to start a company yourself, is less than 65. So he can't currently start a company on his own. So what he's going to do is he's going to pass. That doesn't mean he can't come back in. It just means he gets to see what everyone else does first. Then player 1 comes around, and player 1 has this, and he would be giving up his 15%, his 15 yen revenue, but it allows him to get 10% of the IO. So because he's so short on money, he has 200. Oh no, he has 330. So he has 330. And so he could par at 65. So what he'll do is he will par the IO at 65. Okay. But actually he doesn't need to do that because he's got this dogo. He will eventually be able to get the 5th share he needs if no one else does. So what he's going to do is actually par it at 80. Okay. So par it at 80. And shares in the initial offer up here, always remain at the par price. And that's why we have a little token down here. So you can remember that the IO, which is the orange, will be there. So I've taken the president's share. I now owe 2 times the share value, so $160. Okay, so there's 175, and I'll take back 15. Okay. Then it's player 2, and player 2 has 350, 60, 70. So he has 370. And so he could par at 70. At 70 here, and that's what he's going to do. Now he knows that the IO is going to be taken. Now the IO has 2 tokens, one of which will start on its home station, and it has one other that he can place according to certain rules, which we'll go through when we get to that part of the teach. So then he could buy into the IO, which might be quite an interesting move. because he doesn't necessarily have to start his own company this round. But he did get the Takamatsu Electric Company, and the Takamatsu starts with the Takamatsu Kotohira electric rail. So he will start that for $70. Okay, so he's going to start that for $70. Okay, so he's going to put the par price there. He then takes the president's share there, and then he'll pay 140 because that is the 2 times the par value, and he's just bought 2 shares. Okay, that's why. Because the president's share counts as 2. Okay. We then move on to the green player who's got $260. So obviously 260 is going to be much too small to start a company themselves. They do have the Ono Takamatsu ferry, which obviously is going to get them some revenue throughout, and they've also got the Mitsubishi ferry. So this number 3 is obviously the Ferry King, and so he would like to go somewhere where he thinks somebody's going to build near the ferry. He can't see a good spot like that, so what he's going to do is pass and see what other people do, because obviously the yellow players still get to go. Okay, and then so the yellow player who passed earlier has basically got a choice. He can't start a company himself, but he could buy into the Takamatsu or the IO. And so what he'll do is, I think he likes the look of the Takamatsu particularly. So he's going to buy a share of the Takamatsu from the initial offer. That goes into his portfolio, and then he will then spend $70 because it's coming from the initial, the IPO, the initial par offer. Okay. We then go back to player 1, who's going to buy another share of the IO for $80. So give up 105 and get 25 back. And so he's now got 30%. Okay. And then player 2 is going to buy his 70% share of his $70 share of the Takamatsu. Okay. And then player 3. So player 3 is now clearly, player 4 is not going to try and start a company because he started investing. So I think player 3 is also going to start investing, and he is going to go for the IO. And that's going to be for $80. Okay. Player 4 is also going to go for an IO. Okay. And that's then going to cost him $80. So obviously player 4 is trying to diversify his holdings, so he's not committed to one particular company. And then player 1 will buy his fourth share of IO. Now, when player 4 bought his company, his stock of the IO, something actually happened at that point. The IO floated, so $800 is put into the treasury of the IO. Okay, and we can then put this on the share tracker, the dividends tracker, I should say. Okay. And so the company only gets the capital once it's actually floated, and it can't act in a operating round. So it can exist as a company, but it gets no actions until it has at least 5 shares sold. We will then go to player 2, who's trying to fund this all by himself. But his purchase of the Takamatsu will be the 5th share bought. So he owes $70 there. So that will be that's going to be that there with 5 change. Okay. And so he's bought his 4th share, and somebody else owns the Takamatsu. So Takamatsu gets their revenue as well. So I'll put them out, and they will start with $700. Okay. So they start with a little bit of money as well, and then the player 3 will get an opportunity. So player 3 likes the look of the IO more now, because obviously it's got slightly more money than the Takamatsu, and they've both floated. So we'll actually buy another IO share, and that'll be for $80. Okay. So player 3 is playing a slightly riskier game. He's managed to get a 20% share stake in a company he does not control. And this is always a risk, because if this company ever gets to the point where it can't afford to buy a train, we will go into more details when we get to that point. But suffice to say, a company must always own a train if it has a valid route. And so player 1 could potentially dump the IO onto player 3 if player 3 still has 20% when that happens. So player 4 has a choice. He could suddenly become 20%. He will go with the IO as well, because I think the IO looks like it's probably going to sell out this round, and so it's going to be kind of hot potatoes, trying to get hold of some of that stock. And so we're going to 25 back if I give up a 5. And then we've got the player 1. Player 1's only got $10 more, but he would like at least 50% of the company. But because he sees that other people are going to be owning quite a significant amount. So he could give up. We talked about it already, but he could give up the Dojo railway, but then he's losing this revenue, and this revenue could be really vital to him. So I think he's gonna hang fire and let people, because then obviously he can then potentially dump this company later if he never uses this ability. And so he's going to pass. So player 1 passes. Player 2 has got 25. He's got 65. Now, interestingly enough, at the moment, there's no actual restriction for him to sell. In some games, you can't sell immediately, but 1889, you can sell immediately. So he could potentially sell any of his shares. Obviously, that risks other people taking it from him. And also, it will drop his share value down, which could be a strategy if you so chose. Because he is tempted by by getting in on the IO while it's so readily available, because it might be now as the only opportunity he's got. So I think what he might do is sell a Takamatsu, okay, which gets him $70 back, but drops the value of the Takamatsu 1 per share sold, okay. So 65. So he'll get 70 back, and then he owes another 10 to buy the 80 for the IO. Okay, so he's just trying to spread his investment out. Player 3 is going to buy the final IO for $80. Okay, so player 3 has 30% of the IO, player 1 has 40%, and then player 4 has 20%, and player 2 has 10%. So it's a very, very spread out company, which the player 1 is not very happy about because he wants to use his dojo ability, but at the moment, at least, it's not. It's actually not going to ever happen because it's sold out already. Because it doesn't come from the bank, it comes from the initial offer, and nothing ever goes back there. So this is now just going to sit here making him $15 a turn, $15 an operating round. So that was player 3. Player 4 has 60, so has 55, and so he's going to pass, and if it continues, he will be priority. Okay, so player 4 is currently priority, and priority is decided in this game as in the next player along in turn order from the last person who acted. Player 1 passes, player 2 passes. Okay. And so at the end of the stock round, there are moves which affect sold out companies and companies that have stocks in this area here. So sold out companies float up, and companies that have shares here sink. Okay, so it just indicates that people aren't very happy with the company, or they're very happy with the company, particularly, and it's a hard quality to have.